That's me.
Yes.
PCS Budget. Just give you an overview of the way the presentation will run. Just give you an idea about who we serve as a community, who our kids are. And then as we go down through, I'll talk about these overall budget categories, these areas, and would be happy to answer any questions if you're looking for any more detail in any of those areas. And then some specifics on where there's a significant addition or deduction from the current budget compared to what we're operating under right now.
And if I can add, in your packet, you have in your first sheet is the summary sheet for PCS. He will be referencing this sheet as he goes through his PowerPoint, so this will also give you an overview.
Okay. So Poland Community School, by the numbers, it was a little small on the printout, so that's why there's a separate page for that. So we have, as of October 1st, this fall, we had 471 students, average class size of 17.4. 13.8% of our students have an IEP. Excuse me. And we have 51% of our students that get a free or reduced lunch.
What is that? I'll probably ask a lot of questions because these
That's-
acronyms
no,
don't
that's
mean anything
great.
to me, but what is IEP?
Okay, IEP is an individualized education program, so that's our students who receive special ed services.
Okay.
And a 504 is,
Help.
it's not
health
only
plan.
health, it's,
Access to general education.
yes, and access, it's if a student has a disability, but it's not to the point where maybe it stops them from being able to learn, but it ensures that they can have access. A lot of times you talk about kids with health plans, so a diabetic student may need in a plan that they can test so often and they keep juice with them. They're allowed to eat wherever they are in the building if they need to do so. Those are the things that make sure the students have access to that educational programming.
That actually requires a special program?
It requires a plan. It does require that there's a plan there. And what it's designed to do is it actually, 504s come out of the Office of Civil Rights. And so it is ensuring that we are not denying those kids access to an education. Mm-hmm. So we can't say, oh, you have diabetes, so too bad if your blood sugar's low, take the test anyway. It's trying to make sure that we treat those students equally.
Okay. Gotcha.
And there's a number of other possibilities, but
This is an educational purpose for me too, so it's just...
Yep.
It was the same question.
Okay. Good. And we have similar layouts, so you'll see this on the other principals' reports for their.
We'll save them the torture then.
Yes, I get all the torture. So our total number of teachers, we have 27 regular ed classrooms. We have 3 specialists, 3.5 special ed. I don't need to go down through all those, I guess, for you. We have 9.5 special education ed techs.
I'm sorry, I just want to, what is,
Sorry.
didn't mean to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but what is the shared gate? What is that
That's
acronym?
our gifted and talented education.
Do you guys have a list of acronyms
Yeah,
spelled
that
out
would
somewhere?
be good, wouldn't it? And I'm glad you're asking the questions because we do so often forget. I mean, we talk about this
It's
within
all common language
the
for
schools,
you folks, but
yeah, and we forget to make sure we include that. So, thank you for asking.
Oh, no
yeah, the gifted and talented teacher is shared between Poland Community School and Whittier Middle School. We have a second gifted and talented teacher who works between Minot and Elm Street.
okay.
So again, the number of ed techs is listed there, and you have myself and Mrs. Marston as my assistant principal. So we're going to go down through kind of the budget categories and talk about those. So that would be the first slide. So administration overall, the administrative cluster. So this is kind of, when you think about it, this is what it takes to run the main office. So it's the salaries for myself and the assistant principal, for the secretaries, for anything we need to, student files, student recognition programs, volunteer programs, bringing in our volunteers, doing volunteer trainings, anything that it takes, I guess, to run the main office part of the building. So overall, that administration area, we are actually down 3.8%. And again, you can refer to actual dollar amounts. Sometimes it's easier to look at actual dollar amounts because, percent, it depends on how big that right pot of money is as to how big of a deal 3% is. So administrative salaries, one of the things that we did with actually trying to make sure that we worked with our teachers and then with the administrators was to make sure that we were looking at the regional averages and trying to make sure that we were recruiting and retaining quality staff at an administrative level, at our teacher level, at our ed techs. And that's why kind of across the board, it's roughly a 3% increase in all salaries. It was a little bit more at PCS, and part of that is that regional averages for the size of the building, the assistant principal and my position were both comparatively low. So there was a little bit more of an increase there. But you'll see there was a little bit less in some of the other administrative lines in some of the other buildings. Again, benefits, that's that percentage increase. Includes increases in the main state retirement. When we look at benefit packages, that generally includes, your health care, your retirement. Those are all kind of clumped together.
And that's allocated down to each individual level, like the healthcare costs is somewhere up above. It's all pushed down to the.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the healthcare would be, and it would be actually, you'll see it's broken down. So healthcare is for administrators. That's Mrs. Marston and myself, and that's our health benefits and retirement. And then the secretaries are actually listed separately in there. You find that same thing in other instructional areas. Teachers and ed techs are separate. I kind of clumped them together because I thought it was simpler to think about benefits change in most of those. So the next line, administrative coursework. Last year we didn't budget for any classes for Mrs. Marston or myself, and we budgeted for one each for this upcoming year. The support staff salaries, I had a retirement in the office, so we hired somebody new. The person that was in the position before also had a different benefits package because she had been with the district for so long. She was grandfathered under a different benefits package. So both the salaries and the benefits have dropped for those administrative assistants in the office. That's all I got for administration, unless you have questions around that. Okay, we'll keep rolling. So the next slide is 3 to 6, our regular instruction. And that is up 3.22% as a whole. And again, you see that is the biggest chunk of our the money that we spend as a school. It's about the same in terms of our teacher salaries. There is a contractual, again, increase in salaries, but we did have some staff changes. Some people retired. We've hired some people with less experience, and we do have one fewer teacher. Nope, actually not that line. We don't have one fewer teacher, so it's all the staff changes that we made there. Again, ed tech salaries is an increase in there of about $3,000. Benefits is a bigger one between the teachers and ed techs, and again, including retirement. That's up considerably. So we save money by hiring younger staff, but a lot of times younger staff comes with families, and if they're included in the healthcare program, that's an additional cost to the district. So that's why that's up. Purchase professional services is up. Our 6th graders participate every year in a trip to Ferry Beach for 3 days. And for the past, 3 years ago, it was completely funded by Poland Spring. They opted to diversify what they were investing in and how they were donating money, which led to a cut in the funding for our program. 2 years, actually the past 2 years, our PTA, PTO community clubs for the 3 towns have sponsored all of that shortfall, which is about $10,000 a year. That was not sustainable for them. So if we were going to continue with the program, we had to increase that in our budget lines. And that's where we are with that.
Is there somebody within the school district that actually is tasked with seeking grants that cover items like this and writing grants to try to get funding for miscellaneous items like this?
I do most of our grants, and probably anyone in the district can write grants, but between Melanie and I, we would be the ones doing most of that type of work. Pretty difficult to get funding for field trips, which basically this is what it is. You can get grants for, offering, development of STEM programs or robotics or, things like that, but there aren't many out there for actual field trips, and that's what this would be considered. It's a three-day trip to Ferry Beach overnight for 6th graders, and it's expensive.
Substitutes. Our substitute line is actually, we just decreased that by about $5,000, but that is an actual, that's what we actually spend on a yearly basis normally.
Yeah,
we always hope for normal.
What you're going to find in our substitute lines is we've had some that had, like Rick's lines had $23,000. No, yours
30,
actually had
it was
30,000, and
Yeah.
they never need that much. And then we had schools like mine at Consolidated that had, or in Elm Street that had 22,000. Similar sized school, Bruce Whittier only had 14,000. So every year they were going way over, and the other schools had additional money in there. So we taken about $7,000 between the 3 schools that had the buffer money and moved it into Bruce Whittier. So although it's a reduction here, you will see that when Sean Vincent comes before you, that he has an increase of $7,000 in his substitute line.
And then the last area in there, instructional supplies. So thinking about instructional supplies, that's really everything it takes for the teachers to teach. So all those materials. That's down about $6,000. Part of that is because we're purchasing part of the new math program this year. So there actually won't, so that's in our budget now. It won't all have to be in there next year, right? Tina said we have $30,000 this year. It's down to $20,000 next year. So there's going to be some cut that's made in there. And then a little bit of the money was shifted more properly into a K-2, and you'll see that one's up a little bit. So just comparative in there.
Out of curiosity, the new math program, is that, what is that moving towards?
We haven't made that decision yet. We actually have a couple community nights coming up.
Okay.
Poland Community School basically will hold an informational meeting from like 3:30 to 4:30, and then it will be at Elm Street School from 5 to 6, and it's the next 2 Monday afternoon evenings. We're looking at 2 programs. One is Envision, and the other one is Everyday Math. Everyday Math is the program we currently use, but we have a 2007 version, which wasn't aligned to the Common Core standards, which is what we're assessed on. So we needed to have a newer version that's going to be aligned with that.
So these are computer programs?
No.
It's like a math textbook, the pages the kids do each day. You teach them
Okay.
math.
Yeah.
Okay.
The elementary programs don't use like the old, we think of the old textbook.
Yeah.
I
And you write
remember.
on that. These are more, I mean, there's a lot of teacher material and, a lot of online access for some other pieces of it. But primarily it ends up like student workbooks, where they kind of go through and it helps the teacher teach the lesson ahead of time. Students have a chance to practice those skills that they learned in the lesson, and that's.
So it's better for you guys to purchase a program that's pre-canned from somebody else versus developing a program for our local needs and using that?
It is usually in terms of consistency. That's where you run into trouble. If you don't have the same math program between the three schools, then when the students go to Whittier Middle School, they're going to find all different experiences and levels, and then and the teachers end up maybe teaching more of what they like.
Sure.
Right than what maybe is absolutely needed. So that creates that consistency across the board for us.
And I would add that our teachers, any general education teacher K to 6 is required to have 2 math classes in college. You don't want people that have a experience of 2 math classes designing the curriculum that you teach to your children. You want people who are experts in math with doctorates in math, looking at how do children develop mathematical concepts and sense, and doing a spiral program for you, or a cohesive program.
Oh, I agree. Those people don't need calculators.
So, yes, exactly. Aaron?
Is it my understanding that this is also a requirement from Common Core? Was this upgraded math program?
No.
Okay.
We're required to teach to the state standards. And so you can use any program you choose to use as long as you teach to the state standards. So if you have a program that's not aligned to the state standards, what it means is teachers are searching and picking from other resources, trying to fill in the gaps. And again, you get inconsistencies, and depending on a teacher's strength, it can be a problem. Mm-hmm. So that this will allow us to be more cohesive and also more efficient in deciding what's taught when.
How old is the current K-6 math program?
2007.
Yeah.
So it's 9.
Coming up on 10 years old.
It's been almost a decade
Yes.
since you've spent any money on math instruction in the elementary schools.
Yeah.
I think that's another important piece.
Right.
And also, everything that you put in the budget so far, I've really been just kind of reserving money to this new purchase. Correct?
Yeah, so this will be budgeted, the purchases will be made in July, so we come into the school year with a new math program.
Okay.
And part of the reason we said we could split it into 2 years is we're purchasing part of it this year so we can do the training with staff and have them ready to teach it next year. We don't want it to show up in August and then ask teachers to teach it in September without training and support for being prepared for program. If it's everyday math, it'll probably require less training. There'll just be maybe some new concepts in it that will, we can bridge the gap for. But if it's a total new program, it requires a little bit additional training, probably.
So, sorry, not to keep beating on the
No,
subject.
that's great.
Just more, is there any consistency across the state with this, or does every district do their own thing? So you guys would evaluate a certain program and see if it fits the needs?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that Portland they might use something totally different.
Yeah.
We have local control for what the standards are set by the state. We decide how we teach those standards and with what materials we choose to use. And the everyday math program that we have right now, many districts in the state use it. It has, we are above the state average in mathematics. It has been shown to be very effective. So that's why it's one of our choices going forward. And again, looking at alignment for the Common Core, Envision Math aligns very well with the Common Core as well. So now it's just us deciding which one it is that is right for RSU 16.
Yeah, so does it make sense that this is something so important that there's a regular cadence that these should be updated what's the recommendation? Should it go 10 years, or should it be something that's reevaluated every 2 or 3 years to make sure that we stay at the cutting edge?
This comes back to 2 things. It depends. If the standards don't change and there's not any new groundbreaking research on instructional practices for a particular subject, you may be fine for 10 years. If there are big changes, you may need to do it before. I would also say it depends on your economic conditions. If we are talking about replacing textbooks every 5 years, that's a lot more money in a budget, and I don't get a sense that this community really is pushing for us to have a lot bigger increases in our budget at this moment. So we really are judicious in how we decide when and what to replace. I think teachers would like it to be sooner, possibly. But.
Well, with things moving towards computers, and I noticed you're looking at buying new computers or replacement computers, teachers. Aren't these programs available so that they are available online, that we can get away from the textbook and get to what the real world is really using?
It's actually a combination of both.
It is.
The cost includes online instructional services and experiences for children.
Mhm.
So it's not just paper, pencil-based anymore. So they have combined the two.
Okay.
But at K-6, we don't have computers for every child. We have like a cart that teachers share, and they need to have access every single day for an hour and 10 minutes for math. So we're certainly not looking at the K-6 level to go computer-based math only.
Okay.
So, Carrie,
I'll
and
just
then
add,
we'll move
I'll
on.
just add, I'm at the
Yeah,
high
sorry.
school, and we have looked at, I mean, we are one-to-one, kids all have a device, but sometimes there's hidden costs, and there's a limit to how long you can have it, so you might buy it, and it might cost you the same amount as a textbook, but you only can have it for 4 years, and then it will disappear until you pay them again. So it's not always cost-effective, and it doesn't always get you more than what you would have paid for if you'd bought the books or the program or something like that. So we've had to sort of file through a lot of that, and a lot of times it's not to our benefit fiscally, and it doesn't get the kids anything better.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to K-6, and we'll have Rick kind of move through these.
All right,
things.
so that was the end of 3 to 6. That was the last piece of that. So K to 2, this area is down 4.85%. So there was, again, an increase in terms of the benefits, contractual stuff, and changes in staff. Instructional supplies are up about $2,500, and that was, again, that's a shift. A lot of that money is a shift from the 3 to 6 into a more appropriate area. And then our teacher salaries are down in that line. Again, that was the loss of one staff member. We will have one fewer kindergarten teacher next year.
Will that probably, as far as doing studies of what kids coming in, will we need to replace that kindergarten teacher in the following year, or does it look like it could go a few years?
Kindergarten can be really difficult. It's a real challenge. Our pre-K program right now is full. We have 3 classrooms of pre-K, and so we have 48 students in there, and we have a waiting list that has 3 on it. And we know that we have 4 more who are currently in CDS, Child Development Services. So that's like special ed for really young kids. We have 4 more students that will be joining us as kindergartners next year. So we know we're looking at like 54, 55, but we don't, I mean, it's really hard to tell beyond that exactly how many children are at home and haven't enrolled in a pre-K program. So sometimes until we, even after, I mean, we'll have our kindergarten registration around the first week of May, and even then it's hard to tell because we usually gain 10 to 12 kids over the summer. People didn't, see the notices, read the signs, hear the news, and then they want to register their child, or people move, or so it's really, it's a hard one to judge.
Right.
I know Tina has already said she's completely supportive if we need to go back and look at it, and those classes get too big, then we're going to have to look at how do we, add that person back in. But I think given the numbers we have right now,
It just isn't right.
Right.
Yeah, we have 3 positions around the district that right now are vulnerable. Vulnerable meaning we may need more staffing. So the kindergarten at PCS is right now reasonable levels for next year. We have, Ryan has, his kindergartens are at 19 right now, and 19's a lot for kindergarten. We like to keep it at 18 or under. We did not add a teacher this year. They just had to handle the 19. But again, we're watching that class size because if he has 4 kids move in, and pushing those numbers up in a very young age is difficult. And at Minot, we have 1 class in the upper grades, 5th grade next year, that has 24, projected for 24 kids. Ryan has 6 classes of 22 in that upper grade level span. So our biggest priority is K2. We're watching those. But if numbers change, we will need to hire a teacher or add a teacher back in. We have 6 retirees that we're expecting, and what our hope is if we had to add a teacher in, there'll be some buffer money from the people who are retiring and the new people who are hired to be able to absorb the costs if there's an emergency in one place as far as a oversized classroom that we would address it. So, but it is unpredictable, and we just have to make decisions at this time of year based on what we have for data, knowing we've got to be responsive to needs as they come up.
If something does happen, we have to go back around. Do you have to go back to the towns for them to get approved for additional spending? Or?
No, because when we have a retiree, we leave their salary in because we know we're going to hire somebody.
Right.
And you want to be able to hire the best teacher. You don't know what level of experience they're going to have, but they usually don't have 20 or more years of experience. But you also don't know what benefits they're going to take. So it doesn't pay to drop it down to $30,000, assuming you're going to hire a newbie,
right,
and then want to hire someone who has 15 years of experience and needs a family plan.
Right.
So the salary's in there. It allows you to have a little bit of buffer money and hire the best person. But it also allows you, if you have a bubble classroom, sometimes there's a little bit of additional money in the salary line for actual, once all your staff are hired, that you could do that.
Gotcha.
And the other thing that you do is you freeze the budget if you have to absorb one or two extra teachers, but we haven't had to do that.
We have several students that go to private schools. We have to help fund. Fiddleheads comes to mind. And I've seen kids getting off the bus down there, some from Minot, some from Poland. I don't know, maybe there's some Mechanic Falls ones, I don't know. Where, like if it was a Poland kid, where in Rick's budget does this show? Is it charged to his school?
So it used to be every district had to pay for the kids who went to the charter schools. Every school had to pay if a student went to the charter school. But we don't do that anymore. The state changed their practices, and they pull it out of subsidy before they distribute subsidy to the schools. So instead of Poland having to pay for 12 kids going to Fiddleheads, now there may be 20,000 kids going. I don't know how many kids are going to. Not that many, probably.
Yeah, no.
Going to. I'm thinking, the virtual schools, all the private the charter schools in the state, and the state pays the charter schools like they pay us, so they get their subsidy.
It just comes out of your budget, period.
It comes out from everybody fairly.
Subsidy, right?
Yes, from everybody. It's spread out. It's taken before they divide the subsidy to the school departments.
Okay.
So we never see that loss directly for our 16 kids. I think we might have 14 to 16 kids in charter school right now.
And is it correct to say that was distributed across the state? So
Yes.
It's not like because we're close to Gray, we were taking a bigger hit when we had to pay for it. Now it's spread out through the whole state, so the kids in Rangeley are also paying a little bit of money for kids to go to those charter schools.
Yes.
I thought that's what
Yeah.
the change was, but I just want to make sure.
All right, pre-K.
All right. Pre-K is up, again, 6.89%, although you can see the pre-K budget is a smaller amount of money, so that is a little misleading. So teacher salaries are up a little bit. We had a staff change, and then just contractually that 3% increase. Ed tech salaries are up. We had a change in staff, and we also have the pay increases there. And then, as we said, across the board, the benefits went up as well for everybody in budgeting this. And the new staff is under a different plan as well, so that's why that's a bigger increase. The other ones are really short,
Yes.
so. Guidance is really simple. It's up, but guidance is $44,000 total, so up 4.5%. They're just the contractual increases in the salary and benefits. And then the library is the same situation. We haven't increased the spending in either of those areas, other than that contractual salary and benefit piece that we have to. So summary. So overall, for these areas that I've presented, these 6 areas, there is an increase of $6,399, which is 0.27%. And considering the largest amount of a school's expenditure is salaries and benefits, and those went up about 3%. 0.27, we're trimming.
So I'm going to
So-
remind everybody, he wants you to believe they're trimming? No. Operations have been shifted, yes, yes.
So-
He's got an explanation here
Yes.
for why
There
they're
is
down.
one- There is one more line in there. So it doesn't, what isn't included in what we've presented because of the changes in the way areas are allocated. So it does include our trip spending. That falls under transportation. My stipends are not included there. Although I can tell you both of those lines, I don't have any, we're not looking at any increases in those. Our operations, there is going to be some increases there. We have well, I'll let John talk about it. I'll leave it to him. But there will be some increases around operations. So operations is that facilities piece. What do we need to do the building upkeep? And then the district registrar, that's another reason why the salaries went down in the administration line for the secretaries. We used to share, the district registrar used to be spread out in that line amongst the schools, and now that is in Tina's line. She's nodding, so. So that there was it was split out, if I understand correctly, between the 5 schools. So 1/5 of her salary was in the PCS administration, secretary, support staff line, which is not there.
I said a question on something Rick just said, because now I don't want to make sure I don't say the wrong thing. So the stipends, because mine have gone too, didn't they go into our salary line? So aren't the they're in a totally separate?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
They're an improvement of instruction, which are the lines that are under the system.
I assumed they got absorbed in my salary line, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, last
And then just the
slide.
last thing, there were a couple proposals we had that we ended up recognizing that while we wanted them, they weren't things that could be supported at this time. Really wanted to look at expanding. We have 1.5 pre-K teachers. We were looking at expanding that and making it 2 full-time teachers, which would have allowed us 4 pre-K classes, which then we could have been up to 64 students. And that is a part of our strategic plan, that we would offer pre-K for all. There are some openings in Minot, so we have given people that option. The only problem that sometimes is hard for parents is transportation doesn't get included, and so that can be challenging. But we just, not knowing those numbers, if we add the person, it's hard to say, yeah, we're going to fill 16 more kids, which would be awesome. We don't know that there's 16 more. So that's why we ended up taking that out. And then the laptop cart, you'll probably see this in a bunch of different people's, I think at least at the elementary level. A laptop, a student laptop, costs in the ballpark of $1,300 per laptop for the ones that we get from the school. So in order to have a classroom set, that's around $28,000. What we've opted to do, because the MLTI machines, the main laptop initiative, all of our teachers have machines under that, and those will be coming off that program at the end of next year. When those come off program, we'll be able to buy those for substantially less than $1,300.
Actually, $50. So.
And they're used by teachers for 4 years. So they're going to be machines that are in good shape. I think there's around 150. Linda Chasen will probably address that more specifically when she does the technology. But so part of what they wanted to do is take, instead of all of this money, take a little bit of this, put it in a reserve account so that we have it for next year, and then we buy those machines, which is much more cost effective and many more machines than we would have been able to purchase this way.
You said $1,300 per machine. Is that IBM based or is that Mac based?
It's Mac.
It's Mac. Okay.
This laptop that I have right here is an MLTI laptop.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
I give one to the
and that depends on, so the MLTI program depends on what the state contracts with, because it's a statewide program. So there is some choice, but not as much as, it's not a wide open, buy whatever you want. And
Right.
so.
So it's a Mac-only program, though?
No, there are options for a PC. It just doesn't align with everything else that we have. So we've always been Mac-based, and And when we went through the last contract, we chose to stay with that. I don't remember what their PC option is. The Macs are all preloaded with all kinds of educational programs for students, so it's a huge software cost as well if you don't go with
So it's not just the hardware, the 1,300,
Oh, no,
it's all
they
the...
load everything,
Okay,
so.
I was thinking because I work for a very big company and we flip laptops quite often, and usually they go into the dumpster.
Right.
That, not the only person who works for a big company, but there's opportunities to request those.
Yeah.
And
Let
sometimes
us
they
know.
donate those for free.
I know there are times where we're, like right now, our middle school is looking for a set of laptops for their tech ed class. So they would like to do some robotics work that they don't have the laptop technology to accommodate. And so there's certainly always an opportunity for need. If you know of some, make sure you see me
I work for
later.
the largest company in the world dedicated to industrial automation. So why don't you, not
We'll talk
offline of
later.
this,
Yeah,
why don't
we'll
you
talk
just,
later.
let's talk later and I can make some inquiries for you.
That sounds great. And that's essentially what we're doing going forward, is we're going to be purchasing what this MLTI lease is at a very inexpensive cost in the future, if this committee decides that that's what we're going to do, or the school board. So, all right, Jack.
Just 1 second. Rick, I think you mentioned before, I just want to capture this. You had people on the waiting list for pre-K. I know you said you didn't
Yes.
take it till 16, but how many do you have on the waiting list?
3. Yeah. And we've been full at 48 students pretty much every day. As soon as somebody moves, we call those families, and they usually have their child there within 2 or 3 days. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
And it may be more than that, because if someone hears there's a waiting list, they may not even go down and
Right.
sign it. It's like, well, why bother? There's a waiting
Right,
list.
yeah.
In the last few
And that's fine.
years, we've never had more than a few on a waiting list. So we've always said, and we have space at other places. And part of the conversation might be, if we have space at other places, how we're going to handle that. We probably only need 7 or 8 to make it cost effective, because you basically get a double subsidy for every child that's in pre-K. So if the pre-K programs can make us money, that can go into other programming. But it doesn't make sense to do that for 3 children, and sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's 1 child, and they can choose to go to another school. So essentially, we're offering, we have space for all the pre-K kids that in the district. Sometimes it's not in the school they want it to be in, which is what Rick is seeing.
In the pre-K program, it's half days, 4 days a
Yes.
week. It's not a full day or a
Correct.
5-day week program.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So I want to move us along. We're going to do Ryan's, and then we're going to take a break. I know we've put a lot in front of